It's my great pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Jennie-Marie Larsen, who is the founder of the Foundation for Planetary Intelligence. She is an authority in the field of climate change and the use of technology to address climate change issues. I'm an equity analyst covering the stock markets of the world, and we who look at the stock markets need to understand the burning issue of climate change in a much more holistic manner. And it's with that spirit that we have embarked on a series of episodes where Jennie-Marie and I would be discussing some of the burning climate change issues of our time. So without further ado, I'd like Jennie-Marie to tell us very briefly about what she does and what her institution is all about.
Thank you so much, Nigordon. Lovely to speak with you again, as always, and looking forward to kicking off many, many more of our discussions. And our earlier talks together was me representing Alchemy. And Alchemy, of course, still is a technology-based climate solution addressing land remediation and river rejuvenation. And we were using AI to understand how to predict the impacts of certain cleanup methodologies. And we realized very quickly that, in fact, there are so many brilliant climate solutions out there. And there's a huge appetite around the world for deploying all these solutions. But the challenge is very few of us went to climate school. So we don't know what's the right suite of solutions and what's already out there and what's working, based on measurement, based on macro environmental data. So we launched the Foundation for Planetary Intelligence to create a recommendation engine using AI to understand what's the best fit suite of climate and sustainability solutions for each individual microclimate on the planet. So it's a platform to host hundreds, thousands of climate solutions and enable them to be deployed around the planet.
That sounds like a very exciting and worthy venture in these times. I want to start off by talking to you about an issue which we are confronting almost on an hourly basis. It's right in front of us, which is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I would like to ask you what the implications of this development are for climate change.
That's such a poignant question because it is a devastating and scary and painful moment in time, and it's acute. And so nations are coming together and the world is coming together to address this and to stand in support of Ukraine. But what's interesting about this is it reminds me of a book by Rohinton Mistry, The Fine Balance, right? The Fine Balance of Life. And in this time of devastation, there's also the positive side, which is the world coming together to show support for Ukrainian people. And it's different from climate change, but the same as well, because it's exactly what needs to happen for climate change to actually receive the focus and the transition and the system change that's necessary. And it has to be everybody coming together to fight for this transition together. Although the difference is it's not an acute problem as the world sees it. It's a more of a long-term, drawn-out problem, but it requires the exact same huge come to arms that the world needs to come together to support this transition. So in a sense, it is similar, but there are huge implications, of course, from this conflict, and it has everything to do with energy prices and interruption of supply chains, and impact on business, and impact on trade. And so it certainly is going to impact climate change because the oil and gas prices are like we haven't seen since the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. You know, oil prices are up. I think Brent crude is at $111 per barrel today. And I live in France, and we're seeing the diesel prices are at €2 per liter. So this is going to cause people to make really critical decisions on how they spend energy, how they consume energy. You know, do they drive their car that long distance to visit their parents? So decision making is going to change, and we're going to feel the pain of not being able to consume at the leisurely and gluttonous pace that we're used to so far.
That's interesting. With oil prices reaching record heights, would there be a shift towards more renewable sources of energy where people would be using things like biodiesel, for example? You mentioned the high diesel prices in Europe. Would people be looking at cheaper, cleaner alternatives to fossil fuels?
Well, I think biodiesel has been available for quite a long time and has actually not proven to be the solution that it was hoped to be. But renewable energy, there's such a push to move towards renewable energy, and it isn't for lack of demand or for lack of interest. It's or for lack of affordability of the actual consumption. There's a missing link between the availability and the affordability of installing it in your home.
Well, that's a very powerful implication of this crisis, and I'm very glad that you have looked at it from a holistic perspective. As far as the issue of carbon neutrality is concerned, would you say that the same factor applies, that the crisis might prompt people to take carbon neutrality more seriously, given the very high energy prices, as well as the overall sense of high inflation throughout the world? Will that create a renewed attention on carbon neutrality?
I sometimes wonder if the concept of carbon neutrality is too deep into the study of sustainability and the study of carbon accounting, and that to the average person who is just living their life and doing business in their given industry that may not have anything to do with climate, carbon neutrality may not even mean anything. It's a matter of reaching a point in time where we're producing fewer emissions than we're actually drawing down. And the drawdown can be 50% nature-based, which is between oceans, water, and soil and forests. And then the other 50% has to be either a reduction or it has to be carbon capture technologies. So carbon neutrality, we are so far from even reaching a positive trajectory that could say that we're going to get there, that I think carbon neutral is something that is too vague a concept to the average person who doesn't work deep in climate.
It certainly does. Perhaps we can end this session by you giving us a quick summary of how the Foundation for Planetary Intelligence can contribute towards some of the goals that you talked about earlier.
Well, so the race to net zero, or the race to carbon neutrality, it's a huge pie chart of challenges. So and I'm just going to give a very sort of broad sketch on this. It's approximately a third energy consumption, that's transport, that's heating and cooling, that's producing our energy. And there's making things, which is another approximately a third, and that's cement, and that's steel, and that's everything that we do in development and construction. And that's another third of our piece. And then another third of our piece is land use. And that's our food systems, and that's deforestation, and that's methane emissions from waste that goes untreated. And that's, all of the things that we're doing wrong in interacting with nature. And so there's so many things that need to be impacted, and there's hundreds, thousands of solutions that we can be using that many have not even heard of. The problem of methane emissions from cows farting and burping. If you feed them seaweed, the methane emissions are reduced by 90%.
That's fascinating. And we look forward to discussing this further and informing our listeners about this worthy goal that you have identified and how you can contribute towards the attainment of it.